This is a developing story that has the potential to fundamentally shift the global economic balance of power. We are receiving reports of a massive geological discovery in Canada that experts are already calling the most significant energy find of the 21st century. For decades, the world has operated on the assumption that the transition away from fossil fuels would be a slow, painful, and expensive grind. But news coming out of the Canadian Shield this morning suggests that the timeline may have just been shattered. What has been found is not a new oil field, nor is it a rare mineral required for batteries. It is something that was previously thought to be impossible to find in these quantities underground. Early data indicates that Canada is sitting on a vast, untapped reserve of geologic hydrogen, often referred to as white hydrogen, in volumes so significant that it could render the current global crude oil market obsolete far faster than any policy or climate treaty ever could. This is not a synthetic fuel that requires billions of dollars to manufacture. This is a clean, burnable energy source waiting to be pumped directly out of the ground, ready to plug into the world's existing infrastructure. The implications of this discovery are immediate and staggering. If the preliminary assessments are correct, North America has just secured an energy asset that completely bypasses the geopolitical stranglehold of OPEC and the environmental costs of fracking. Markets are already reacting to the rumors, and energy analysts are scrambling to rewrite their forecasts for the next decade. We are looking at a resource that burns without carbon emissions, exists in massive natural reservoirs, and costs a fraction of what it takes to extract and refine crude oil. This is the moment the energy industry has been fearing and hoping for simultaneously. To understand the magnitude of what has just happened, we have to step back from the breaking headlines and look at the ground itself. For over a century, geologists believed that pure hydrogen did not exist in nature in significant reservoirs. The dogma was that hydrogen was too reactive, that it would bind with oxygen to form water, or carbon to form hydrocarbons the moment it was created. Because of this belief, nobody bothered to look for it. We drilled for oil, we drilled for gas, and we ignored the anomalies that didn't fit the pattern. But in the deep, ancient rock formations of Canada, something different was happening, something that went unnoticed until sensors designed for a completely different purpose started picking up readings that simply didn't make sense. The story of this discovery begins not with a bang, but with a confused geologist looking at a sensor readout that was theoretically impossible. In the vast, remote stretches of the Canadian wilderness, exploration teams were scanning for traditional resources. What they found instead were pockets of gas with pressure levels and purity ratings that defied standard geological models. Unlike natural gas, which has trapped carbon and hydrogen, this was pure fuel. It was the energy equivalent of finding a freshwater lake in the middle of a desert. When the samples were brought to the surface and analyzed, the results confirmed what the sensors were screaming. This was high-grade, naturally occurring hydrogen. This changes the physics of the energy transition. Until now, the argument against hydrogen has always been cost and efficiency. To get hydrogen, you usually have to strip it from natural gas, which creates carbon emissions. Or you have to use massive amounts of electricity to split water molecules, which is expensive and energy intensive. This is why hydrogen has always been the fuel of the future that never quite arrived. But the Canadian discovery changes the equation entirely. If you can drill for hydrogen just like you drill for oil, the cost drops from $5 a kilogram to under $1. At that price point, it becomes cheaper than diesel, cheaper than gasoline, and cheaper than natural gas. It becomes the economic inevitability that oil barons have historically feared. As the news ripples through Washington, Beijing, and Brussels, the geopolitical chess pieces are already moving. For the United States, a massive supply of cheap, clean fuel on its northern border is the ultimate strategic ace. It secures energy independence for the North American continent for generations. It creates a firewall against the volatility of the Middle East and the supply chain dominance of China in the battery sector. But for countries whose entire economies rely on the export of crude oil, this Canadian discovery is an existential threat. If Canada can flood the market with a fuel that works in modified internal combustion engines but emits nothing but water vapor, the value of a barrel of oil begins to plummet, not because of regulation, but because of pure, ruthless market competition. However, the journey from discovery to dominance is never a straight line. The sheer scale of this resource raises questions that engineering teams are racing to answer. The infrastructure required to transport hydrogen is different from oil. The molecules are smaller, more prone to leaking, and require different metallurgy for pipelines. Yet, the existence of the resource solves the hardest part of the puzzle, the source. The engineering challenges are hurdles, not walls. With the potential revenue measured in the trillions, the capital required to build the necessary infrastructure is already mobilizing. Venture capital firms and energy giants that were previously doubling down on wind and solar are now looking north with a renewed, feverish interest. What makes this narrative so compelling is the irony of the location. Canada, a nation whose economy has heavily relied on the oil sands, often criticized for their environmental impact, may now hold the key to the world's cleanest energy source. It is a twist of fate that provides a lifeline to the very workers who feared being left behind by the Green Revolution. The skill sets required to drill for geologic hydrogen are nearly identical to those needed for oil and gas. We're not talking about retraining a workforce from scratch. We're talking about redeploying an army of skilled laborers to drill for the future instead of the past. The drilling rigs, the geological expertise, the heavy machinery, it's all there, ready to be pivoted toward this new reality. But we must also look at the skepticism that rightfully accompanies such a massive claim. History is littered with miracle fuels that failed to deliver. Is this finding truly scalable? Or is it a geological anomaly restricted to a few pockets of the Canadian Shield? Independent verification is currently underway, and the early data suggests that these reservoirs are continuously replenishing. Unlike oil, which takes millions of years to form, geologic hydrogen is generated by the interaction of water with iron-rich rocks deep underground, a chemical reaction that is happening right now in real time. This suggests that these wells could operate more like factories than mines, producing energy indefinitely as long as the water and rock interact. If verified, this distinction transforms energy from a finite resource to a sustainable flow. The psychological impact of this discovery on the American public cannot be overstated. For years, the narrative has been one of sacrifice. Drive less, pay more, lower your standard of living to save the planet. This discovery offers a different path, a technological and geological abundance that solves the climate crisis without demanding a reduction in energy consumption. It promises a future where high-energy industries, from steel manufacturing to heavy shipping, can continue to operate at full capacity without cooking the atmosphere. It shifts the tone from doom to opportunity, reigniting a sense of optimism that has been absent from the energy conversation for a long time. As we look deeper into the geological reports, we see that this isn't just about Canada. This discovery validates a geological theory that suggests these hydrogen pockets exist globally, but Canada's unique ancient geology makes it the prime location for the largest, most accessible deposits. This puts Canada in the position of being the Saudi Arabia of the hydrogen age. The diplomatic leverage this creates is immense. We are likely to see a restructuring of North American trade agreements, with energy security becoming the central pillar of U.S.-Canada relations. The border becomes not just a line on a map, but the seam of a unified energy superblock capable of powering the Western world independently. Yet, with great potential comes significant risk. The rush to exploit this resource could lead to a gold rush mentality, where safety protocols are bypassed in the name of speed. Hydrogen is highly flammable and difficult to contain. The environmental impact of drilling, even for a clean fuel, is never zero. There will be land rights disputes, especially with indigenous communities whose territories sit atop these massive reserves. The narrative of clean energy often hides the messy reality of extraction. How the Canadian government and the international corporations involved navigate these waters will determine whether this resource becomes a blessing or a curse. The corporate reaction has been swift and silent. While the public is just learning about this now, insiders suggest that major oil conglomerates have been quietly acquiring mineral rights in these regions for months. They saw the data before the rest of us. They understand that their survival depends on controlling the very thing that threatens to destroy their traditional business model. We are witnessing a covert transformation of big oil into big energy, a pivot that ensures they remain the gatekeepers of the global fuel supply, regardless of what that fuel actually is. This consolidation of power raises difficult questions about monopoly and pricing, questions that regulators in Washington and Ottawa will have to grapple with very soon. As we consider the long-term horizon, we have to ask what this does to the price of energy. If supply is as abundant as the geologists claim, we could be heading toward an era of energy deflation. Imagine a world where the cost of heating your home or shipping goods across the country drops by half. The inflationary pressures that have plagued the global economy for the last few years are largely tied to energy costs. If you collapse the cost of energy, you change the cost of everything, from food production to construction. This discovery, therefore, is not just an energy story, it is an economic story that touches every wallet in America. There's also a profound scientific romance to this discovery. We have spent decades looking up at the sun for solar power and looking at the wind for turbines, all while the Earth itself was cooking up a solution beneath our feet. It reminds us of how much of our own planet remains a mystery. We have mapped the surface of Mars better than we have mapped the deep subsurface of Earth. This Canadian discovery is a humbling reminder that nature often holds solutions that we are too arrogant or too distracted to notice. It forces a reevaluation of geological science, prompting a new wave of exploration that will likely yield even more surprises in the years to come. As this story continues to unfold, the next few weeks will be critical. We are waiting for the release of the official reserve estimates and the initial production timelines. When those numbers hit the public domain, the reaction on Wall Street and in the global commodities markets will be instantaneous. We expect to see a significant divestment from traditional long-term oil projects and a massive capital injection into hydrogen infrastructure. The timeline for the end of oil has just been accelerated, not by a ban, but by a better product entering the market. This is a turning point. We are standing on the precipice of a new industrial revolution, one fueled not by the carbon-heavy remnants of ancient life, but by the elemental power of the earth itself. The era of oil defined the 20th century, its wars, its economy, and its pollution. The discovery in Canada suggests that the 21st century will be defined by something cleaner, faster, and more abundant. As the drill bits turn in the Canadian North, they are not just boring into the rock, they are opening a door to a future that, until this morning, we didn't dare to believe was possible. This is the beginning of the end for the old energy order, and the start of something entirely new.